Hi, I'm Alan Mishkulnik. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Alan Mishkulnik Golf AMG. Today I will be starting my series on the 10 words of stack and tilt, and in particular I'll be focusing on the first 2 words, which are arguably the most important words, namely weight forward. I'll describe what this is about and I'll explain to you what I see amateurs do incorrectly when applying this principle, and then finally I'll give you a couple of drills which you can use to practice this at home. So one thing that the stack and tilt system does is that it provides us with a very basic framework of what the golf swing entails, namely the 10 words. Those being weight forward, shoulder down, hands in, arms straight, and tuck hips. Now, what we need to understand is that this is a very simplified version of the main motions of the golf swing, and by understanding the system better as a golf coach and as a player, you are then able to add all the detail that is necessary. What we're going to be looking at today are the very first 2 words, namely weight forward. All right, guys, so what are we talking about when we refer to weight forward? I think we need to look at, firstly, your setup position, then also your backswing, so what happens there, and then your downswing. So when I take my setup, so stack and tilt, weight forward, basically states that we stack both our centers. So we have the center of our pelvis, that will be our lower center, and then the center of our shoulders, which would be our upper center. We stack them on top of each other, slightly left bias. So weight would be front side bias. How do I achieve that? At setup, just push my lower and upper center slightly to the left. Measurements have shown that the very best players in the world tend to have their weight forward about 55-45%. 55% lead foot, 45% trail foot. Now in the backswing, what the stack and tilt system prescribes is that there is no weight shift. So what we'll try to do is to keep those 2 centers stacked on top of each other by tilting, turning, and extending our spine at the right rate. Basically means that our head stays stable and our pelvis also stays centered. So there's no shifting to the right or to the left, as the case may be. So in our backswing, we stay centered, and that would result in a weight distribution of 60% lead side and 40% trail side. Now in our downswing, the weight will then progressively shift towards the target. So what I would do is I would push my hips towards the target. There would be a pressure and weight shift onto my left foot, and at impact, ideally what we'd like to see is 80% of my weight on my lead foot and 20% on my trail foot, and that would continue, and the weight distribution in my end position would then be 95% front foot and 5% trail foot. So there are 2 reasons why a player would want to keep his or her weight on his lead side. So the first reason is in relation to the first fundamental of golf, which is low point control. So a player who shifts his upper center or lower center away from the target in this manner, for example, in our experience, isn't really able in most cases to shift his weight back to where it needs to be in order to bring the low point slightly left of where the ball is in order to produce solid contact. Instead, that player will tend to stay back and thus hit the ground a bit too early or avoid the ground and top the ball. Now the second reason why it is desirable to keep your weight forward is because a player who has a tendency to shift his weight off the ball, maybe he's shifting by shifting his upper torso to the right and not making it back, that player would be hanging or pivoting around his trail foot, which in turn encourages a path, a club path that is out to in, and with an open club face, that would then produce a slice, something that is dreaded by all amateur players. And instead, if you kept your weight more forward, or that player kept his weight more forward, that would encourage a path that is more in to out, and with a face that is slightly shut to that path, that would then produce a more desirable draw of the ball. So what we need to try to do is to keep our weight forward in order that it is then easier to shift forward in our downswing. So measurements, 3D measurements here at Golf Deck have shown that in the backswing, the pelvis actually doesn't move to the right or left. In the downswing, into your impact position, hips shift approximately 3 inches, so that's like 9 to 10 centimeters towards the target, and then into the end position, they push to about 6.5 inches towards the target. So there's a significant hip sway, shift of your weight, shift of your lower center towards the target in the downswing. Okay, so what do I do if I encounter a student or I work with a student who has issues getting his weight forward in his downswing? Well, firstly, I will make sure that at setup, he's got 60% of his weight on his front foot and both his centers are stacked on top of each other. Secondly, I'll make sure that in his backswing, he's not shifting either center away from the target and the centers still remain stacked on top of each other. There is a video that I've done which discusses this in more detail. Please do have a look. Now, if those two things are present, at setup, sufficient weight forward, and in the backswing, not shifting away from the target, however, that student is still struggling to get his hips and his weight onto his lead side, then what I like to do with that student is get him just to picture his hips in space. So at setup, backswing, hips stay centered, and then in his downswing, what he needs to do is he needs to shift his pelvis beyond his left foot. So I would typically start with a student without using a club, just getting that student to feel his hips pushing beyond his left foot, and a nice feel also for that would be that he would feel his right foot moving to the inside and his weight sort of getting him to roll onto the outside of his left foot, of his lead foot. And once he feels that little feel and also pictures that image of his pelvis moving beyond his trail foot in his downswing, so it's almost like his belt buckle is beyond the left foot or the left heel, then we can introduce a turning component, and that would be a good feel and a good position to be in as regards hip sway and weight shift. Now what you can also do is you can take a club and you can position that club between your feet, and you can try to move your hips. So if that were your center line, you would try to move your hips beyond that center line, because at impact, you'll see the very best players at impact have their hips left of that center line, and then from there they would keep pushing into the end position. So use this club on the ground to give you a visual of keeping your hips over that club in your backswing, and then pushing your hips left of that shaft entirely in your downswing and into your finish. Okay, so why don't we just rehearse that very quickly. So it's backswing, and then we have to shift our hips. That's how it's going to feel. Shift our hips beyond the lead foot, and then move into our end position. All right, why don't we just try that out? Okay everyone, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me the thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel. I'm looking forward to discussing the other 8 words of the stack and tilt system with you in the next videos to come. Thanks a lot and goodbye from Singapore.